And we are live. Hi, everyone. Um, Welcome to Homeroom School Night. My name is Fred Sasaki, and I am your co-host with Keidra Chaney for tonight's show, Coping and Not Coping with COVID-19. And like I said, that is brought to you by Homeroom Chicago as part of our School Night series. So it's not easy getting through a global pandemic. Tonight, we are talking with three Chicagoans on how they are coping, staying afloat, and addressing mental health during this tough time. They are Steph Fowler, Whitney Hill, and Xiana Moon, all of whom Keidra will introduce shortly. We'll also explore the structural inequalities in the city and beyond that make coping easier or harder for certain communities, and how to make space for hope and joy while not losing sight of what's being lost. But first, what is Homeroom? Homeroom is a Chicago-based 501c3 not-for-profit that designs artistic projects and programs with two core values: conversation and collaboration. Also, compensation. Homeroom pays artists and curators for their time and talent. That's really important and something we'll talk about more later in the show. Um, just want to say something about working with Homeroom. Homeroom is sort of an artistic playground, more like recess on the school theme for artists and venues to experiment. Homeroom highlights new, hybrid, and emerging works as a practice. Speaking of which, look out for Homeroom's forthcoming 10 by 10 2020 in collaboration with Chicago Composers Orchestra. So 10 by 10 is a commission of dual media pieces between 10 composers and 10 visual artists. The results are always stunning and really over the map. They basically take 10 visual artists, 10 composers, and they make something. It's a great and long-running series that I really encourage you to check out. And now I will turn to Keidra with a tip of my hat. She almost single-handedly put this show together while I have been struggling to stay afloat, as I know she has been too. And with that, and much love and respect, Keidra Chaney.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for taking the time to stay in with us tonight for school night. I just wanted to start by saying this is a very different show, both topic and format wise, than we had expected to do for the school night series this year. But Fred and I were really inspired to do this in part because we're both struggling right now. It's a rough time, and we wanted to make a space to talk about it and to be honest with other folks about kind of what we're going through and what's been difficult for us and what's been easier for us. This is an unprecedented moment for us, and will totally admit that none of us have all of the answers. But we wanted to take a space to talk to different folks in Chicago about how we're all getting through this, and also have some real talk about how some of us, for of various reasons, structural and whatever, who are not getting through this and won't be getting through this. Um, so with that, we wanted to start off the evening with an essay from Whitney Hill. Whitney Hill is the founder and director of SPORK, a nonprofit for people with cognitive, physical, and non-apparent differences. Whitney's vision is supported by her passion for advocacy and personal background of identifying as someone with a disability. Whitney also serves as an elected member of the Chicago Transit Authority's ADA Advisory Committee, and she is also a 2020 fellow for the ADA Advancing Leadership Institute. And with that, here is Whitney Hill.
Thank you so much, Keidra, and thank you everyone for having me here. I feel really honored and blessed to be here. So I'm going to start off with reading an edited version of an article that I wrote for my nonprofit, Spork. It's called Digital Depression and Quarantine Faces. And so I have a little timer here. I'm going to try to get this exactly right because I want to make sure I don't go too over. So this is the beginning of the article. Each night at 8 p.m., when I go out to my Chicago studio apartment balcony, I yell into the sky. I yell as loud as I can to thank those who are actually protecting me and to hear my voice so that it can remind me that I'm still alive. After 3 minutes, my voice is hoarse. People stop shouting after around 5 minutes. My throat hurts, but I know it will stop once I go inside. The stabbing sting in my vocal cords will soon fade. Right now, though, I yell, I wail and scream. I'm alone in this apartment every second of every day, under lockdown, under threat, and under fear. I'm forced to watch the swift action of this virus overtake the clouded inaction of this administration. My voice is ignored by everyone else and unused throughout the day, except right here at 8 p.m. I'm afraid of the future. Being inside, clocking in at 4 weeks now, actually going on 9, which has been a surprising experiment of isolation for me. All my introversion powers are being tested. Don't get me wrong, I isolate during the best of times because that's what makes me feel the best at heart. This staying inside, trapped with my rampant depression and anxiety, and cut off from all meditative avenues, feels like a beast turned in on itself. There are no museums to go to, parks to cycle through, or churches to pop into. No familiar faces to peer upon, odd idiosyncrasy of the mundane, or soft touches. And I have to be careful because any negative emotion I birth into my apartment now stays and lives with me within these walls. I breathe fire and try in vain to exhale feathers. I am a buoyant bomb. I know that depression is something that people don't want to willingly talk about. Unlike most disabilities, as soon as I finally break down my walls and talk about my symptoms, I turn people away because suicidal ideation and self harm are weighted balloons. If they're too heavy for me to consistently keep afloat, why not others? Plus, I really don't want involuntary to have to be a part of my vocabulary just because I'm admitting to my normal mental health reality. So I realize that when I'm going through a depressive episode, most conversations are constructed on my end to help ease and comfort others. I don't want anyone to feel sad, weird, or uncomfortable. So I listen intently to their concerns while biting my tongue about my own. I remind myself that most people like to only talk about themselves anyways and that I shouldn't be too upset. This should be expected. And when it is my turn to quietly quip about my difficulties, I grin and accept the broke ass cousin of empathy because sympathy is better than nothing, I guess, as long as I don't get judged or pitied. With a pandemic amongst us, it actually seems harder to validate any depressive episode because that old chestnut keeps thundering through my head. There are others who are worse off than me. Why should I be upset? This COVID-19, this has changed everything. Nothing will be the same. When I'm suffocating in my own presence in my apartment, I quietly gasp for clarity with these little Zoom calls, texts, and Netflix viewing parties. I see all these beautiful pixelated faces, all these souls that I rather experience in person, a luxury that I can't have. I patiently wait for them as their picture flickers on the screen and as the glitches finally sync their words with their mouth. I yearn for the familiar voice of those who know me best. It feels like most times my soul is trying to leap through the glass just to be with the ones I love. I feel foolish. Thank you guys. And if you want to read more, please go to Spork's website, www.sporkability.org. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Whitney. I'm so glad you read this. This was part of the reason why I was like, oh, I really want you on here. And I'm so glad that you agreed to read it. So a couple questions for you, at least to start out with. Full disclosure, both Whitney and I are ADA 25 Advancing Leadership Fellows, which is a fellowship for people with disabilities. And we've talked about this personally, like in person, and just outside of this. But this really spoke to me as somebody who lives with anxiety and depression. And so this feels very right, or at least resonant for me. But so much of what is talked about with COVID-19 on a lot of levels when it comes to illness and disability, well, and mental health in general, like we see certain framing about how just across the board that puts people with illness, like it puts a value judgment on people with illnesses, whether it's mental illness, whether you have the virus or not. Like there's the people who get to stay well and are doing right, and then there are people who are doing wrong and like you've done something wrong to get ill. And just in general, how you feel the framing, specifically for mental health, but just in general, how you feel the framing gets that wrong, or what do you feel about how the framing of that within just the public eye in media has been when it comes to illness?
You know, it's been really interesting. I feel so conflicted for a lot of different reasons. I feel like for my loved ones and therapists who know me, for them, this has been hyper alert because I feel like they're on guard for my benefit. You know, they can't be here with me. They know that things are getting tough. And so I feel like they are for some of them, they're just really trying to really be present. And you know, it's interesting because I feel like when you have especially non-apparent, you know, disabilities like a lot of mental health, especially like depression, anxiety, you're used to all those symptoms being ignored. And so all of a sudden having a lot of loved ones being hyper vigilant about it, like that's a new territory for me personally. And then it's also interesting because for me, I keep thinking and in part, I think really getting anxious for others who don't have a name or a label or a diagnosis for what they're feeling or going through. And this is the first time that they've hit this rock bottom and now they're experiencing all these symptoms for the first time. Because I know for me, the 2012, you know, recession, all of that was one of my big rock bottoms that forced me to go to depression. You have to go to, I'm sorry, to therapy and to get the diagnosis that, you know, that I had major depressive disorder, that, you know, to get the A to the B to the C to the Z. And that's a difficult road to go down. And I really do, I feel like I was blessed to have to have a support system to help guide me through that, to help. And I really do kind of get anxious for people who are in brand new territory, who are feeling that they are becoming very depressed for the first, second, umpteenth time, but now they really need resources, but they don't have it. So my anxieties with what's going on right now with just mental health especially just goes all over the place. I really want people to get the resources that they need.
Whitney, can you tell us a bit more about SPORK and how it's supporting people with invisible disabilities, and just about what you do in general?
Yeah, I'll be more than happy to. SPORK is a 501c3 nonprofit for people who are a part of the disabled community in one way or the other. And we really try to advocate the voices and the lived experiences of the people within the community, because I feel like that is so valuable. If rather you acquired your disability or you have come across your disability through, accident or illness or whatever, I feel like there's always going to be for someone a lot of fresh ground of what it's going to be like. And even if you lived it for years, you're not always going to have a support system that's going to understand what you're going through. And so SPORK really tries to highlight those stories. We advocate and try to get people to write about their experiences so that others can read about it and, find solidarity. We really try to just give as big of a soapbox as we possibly can for the disabled community, to just really talk about what they're going through. And we do it, we try to make everything accessible. We don't own any of the submissions that come in. We really try to give full ownership and rights, to the writer. We just really want to just try to get the voice out. And then side part, we occasionally do video projects where we help highlight organizations and other businesses that help support the disabled community.
There's a question that we'll be asking everybody tonight, but are there any mutual aid or support projects or just something in general related to COVID-19 that you might want to lift up or call attention to, or just shout out that you think might be important for people to know about?
Yeah, I think just overall, when it comes to mental health, when it comes to going through this quarantine and just what's going to come up by yourself in isolation, I just want to make sure that stays in conversation, because I think that everyone is going through such a tough time, and I would just really hate for just any part of our community to get overlooked because they don't necessarily have the platform or voice to speak for themselves. So yeah.
Awesome.
I also just wanted to throw in there real quick that I spent some time on your website just looking at it, and I was really interested or very comforted by the scroll of images that you have. You have a lot of artwork up, and it was comforting in a very different way because the artwork, well, one, it was recognizing me, but then I felt like it was recognizing the turmoil that we experience inside. So it was comforting in this way. And I also read that you're an artist and you have your BFA. And I was just curious, what did you study or what do you do?
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for asking that. I went to the School of the Arts of Chicago, SAIC here, and I love always being able to talk about and show appreciation towards my college, because I feel like they really helped me find my voice, not only within who I wanted to be as an artist, but transformative, how I wanted to help others. And that launched me into this whole other area of helping people with disabilities. When I went there, my background is product design, and I was really interested in designing tools and devices for people with disabilities. And at the time when I was going to college there, there were some of the few colleges, art colleges, that really had a few classes that focused on that. And so, I feel like it's altogether it's so important for people to be able to express themselves. I think that's where healing comes in and goes out, like from beginning, middle, and end. And I feel like when someone does not have the ability in any format that it is, if it's, painting, if it's, dancing, if it's writing, if it's music, if it's singing, whatever it is, if I feel like if people don't have that outlet, then that really does stifle a big part of their progress, and I feel like, especially when it comes to having a disability, the arts is one of those few communities that just really accepts you for who you are and as you are. And only thing it really asks you to do is just, kind of to live in your truth, like, as people say. So I feel incredibly bonded with the art community and how it intersects with the disabled community. I just have a lot of appreciation, because for me personally, I would not be here if it was not for the art community giving me that, like, guiding arm, that this is how I could help people.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much. That was a really beautiful essay, and I loved hearing your answers. Shall we move on, Keidra?
Yep.
Hi. Yeah, sorry. I, experiencing that disconnect that we're speaking of. But I really
We're
am
making
here,
it.
and you guys are too. And some other people I'm trusting are there too. So our next guest is Dawn Xiana Moon. Dawn Xiana Moon is the founder director of Rax Geek, a belly dance and fire performance company that's been featured on MSN, UK Channel 4 TV, WGN TV, and more. Steph was just named Best Stage Performer and Best Dancer by the Chicago Reader, as well as Best Singer-Songwriter, runner-up, and Best World Music Act finalist. As a musician, she's performed in 10 states. Her music is a blend of folk pop with influences from jazz and traditional Chinese music.
Awesome. Thanks for coming, Dawn. We're super excited to have you here. Um, so you've been super vocal and open, and really, you've really talked at length online and various places about some of the challenges of this moment for folks, especially while heading up Rax Geek and doing performance work. Just the struggles of moving to virtual, what it means for like lost wages. And I would really love it if you could share some of those thoughts that you have today about how artists, performers, gig workers are really coping with this moment right now, and kind of how you're coping with it as well.
Sure. It's been a lot. So everything that I do relies on live performance. So when you have, I want to talk a little bit about when the beginning, everything was kind of going down. It was really, really difficult for us because the guidelines were changing so very quickly. It was a lot to keep up with. So a few hours, you would have a guideline that said 50 people can meet together and that would be fine. And then the guidelines a few hours later would say you can have a group of 10 people, 50 people isn't safe anymore. And so having all of these changes come at you really, really quickly was a lot to keep up with, especially as someone who is the person who is responsible for saying the show is canceled, the show is not canceled, and can we safely bring people together in a theater? So I, at one point, had a music gig, and the recommendations for crowd size changed so quickly that I canceled the music gig half an hour before I was supposed to leave my apartment to go do it. So that's where we were sort of starting from as live performers. Kind of immediately overnight, all of our gigs that you're doing, corporate gigs that pay a lot of money, all of those got canceled pretty much overnight. All of our theater shows, a lot of theaters in Chicago rely on people actually being physically there because a lot of them make their money off of bar sales. And so that's not something that translates very easily online. And it's not something that works very well to have people come through and, pick up orders, because they're really relying on physical bodies being a space, and that's everything we do. So it's been a lot to try to navigate all of that. I, at this point, have produced 3 different live stream shows where we've tried from our various different apartments to do full performances, entirely live stream. So overnight, I was learning how to deal with live streaming software, figure out all the technical issues because there were so many. The software never works the way that you want it to or hope that it will. And try to make everything as smooth as possible. And I'm really grateful too that our audiences have been really, really lovely and supportive. They've been really kind about rolling with technical difficulties. It comforts me seeing that, people on the scale of Broadway has been doing these live stream shows as well. And even on the scale of Broadway, they've had technical difficulties, which makes me feel a lot better with our little group. So it's really been kind of this massive shift of, it's going to be a long time, I think, before it is safe for us all to gather in person in the kind of numbers that you need in order to make live theater performances work. We're doing in Illinois, a slow phased rollback out of things. A lot of people in the arts community are figuring for the rest of the year, more or less, we're not really going to be able to do anything. So that's a huge pivot. And add on top of that, the fact that a lot of artists live really, really close to the edge, even on a normal time. So one of the immediate concerns that I had, and I know a lot of other people in our community had too, was that a lot of people were going to have trouble very, very quickly doing basic things like paying rent and groceries. So it was comforting to see the community come together and people say, hey, here's an artist relief fund. If you need $200 this week, here's how we can try to do that. Some arts organizations saying we're going to find some spots in our budget where we can just give people who are in our group who need some help, just give them a little bit of money to help them pay their grocery bills this week. And that's been really comforting to see. But at the same time, the longer it stretches out, the harder it is. And artists are not really getting unemployment. In Illinois, we're not even allowed to apply for gig workers. So for the most part, most artists are 1099. So we're all independent contractors. We work for lots and lots of different people. And nobody really has received unemployment yet for that. And it's been, I think, we're going on 2 months now that we've been in lockdown. And we can't apply until May 11th for you. The process in Illinois is a little bit convoluted. You have to apply for normal unemployment insurance, get rejected, and then in theory, May 11th, they're opening it up to 1099 workers. And then I'm not sure what the delay is going to be until then. So right now you've got a lot of people who have been out of work for about 2 months with no income coming in overnight, who have already been living on the edge. So it's been a really tough time to be an artist. Long answer for that.
That was
Oh, that's great.
Can you?
Oh, wait,
Can
I
you
just want to
speak
do a quick
further
follow-up
to-
if you don't
Oh,
mind.
sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I just wanted to ask really quickly about the battle between the battle between going back to work and staying in for gig workers, and the whole idea of, because there's just so much going on with that in terms of like the desire to want to get back out there, but the understanding, the support of being safe out there, and whether, venues, workplaces offer that level of safety and support for folks. The need to make money versus the need to stay safe, and whether you have an idea from folks in your community, the performing community, about kind of where folks are in terms of how they're feeling about what is next, about working or not working in the next few months, weeks.
I think it's a mixed thing. I think on the people who are in charge of theaters and in charge of putting on performances, I think a lot of us are really, really hesitant to kind of jump back into things. I mean, I don't want to be responsible for anybody getting sick. I know that demographically artists have a tendency to be younger, and so we're less likely to get, really severely ill or to die, but we're responsible for all of the people who are in the theater with us as well. And some of our audiences might be older and people might be immunocompromised, and that's a problem, right? So I think a lot of people have been really concerned about what that looks like. On the individual artist level, of course, you do get concerned because you need gigs in order to pay money. So I really think that the solution is not, it's a terrible thing that in this country we have set everything up so that you are trying to make a choice as an individual between, do I work for, frankly, it's not going to be the same kind of money that you are used to or need, because the audience sizes are going to be smaller. Corporate events are not going to have the really, really large ones. So maybe you'll get lucky if you get something smaller. So you're working for less money in order to hope that you're going to survive. And that's not a choice that a lot of other countries have forced people to make. We really need systemic help. And I think the push to go back to work is to say, well, we as the government, this way you're allowed to work, so now we don't have to pay unemployment. Businesses are allowed to open, and so now you have no negotiating power with your landlords about whether you can pay rent for your venue. And that's going to, frankly, kill a lot of small businesses, and it's going to really hurt a lot of people. So basically, I just don't think it's a fair choice to ask people to have to make.
That's such a great point. And so further to that, what kinds of supports would you like to see from the city, the state, and also from audiences?
I would love for the city and the state to put more money into venues. Anybody who's paying rent right now is really, really in a tough spot, because as things open up and your negotiating power goes away, I mean, like, I'm sure the Hideout's not going to be able to open for a long time, right? All of the music venues are not going to be able to open for a while. Theaters are not going to be able to open for a while. It's probably going to be, 2021 before those come back. And so I would really love to see government help going to those places, whether it means negotiating with landlords in some way, or grants, or anything along those lines. The rent part is a really, really major issue. And without those venues, artists have no place to perform. So we're really, really tied into that. I would also love to see more help for gig workers in general. Artists are in a very similar spot in terms of the gig worker finances as anybody else who's on a 1099. So more focus on helping folks who are 1099 workers is going to be really, really helpful. And in terms of audiences, honestly, I have been so incredibly thankful and grateful. We did a Facebook fundraiser and people were really generous. We've done these live stream shows and we've just done them for tips. And people have been really, really generous about donating to that. And I would say just, keep doing that. Keep supporting, especially the independent artists in your city who are doing things, whether they're teaching classes or putting on shows. Like a $50 tip in a live stream show really does mean a lot at this point.
Awesome. So I wanted to take the last 5 minutes. You've got a show for Roxy coming up on the 15th. Is that right?
Yeah.
That's specifically about just what's been going on right now with white supremacists and, stoking anti-Asian racism and just racism across the board. But I wanted you to talk about your show and how you put it together and just kind of what folks can expect when they tune in.
So Rox Inferno, so we have Rox Geek and Rox Inferno, and Rox Inferno is our not explicitly nerdy cosplay arm. So it is a sort of more open theme. We're doing a show on May 15th on Facebook Live that is titled "I Am Not a Virus." So people who are Asian American have been facing a lot of harassment right now, and frankly, a lot of hate crimes because of the way that our political discourse has gone. We've got politicians putting the blame on China, which all Asians end up getting clumped in together into this massive group. And so that ends up infecting the entire community. And you're seeing people, like in New York, a woman walked out of her apartment. It looked like she was putting garbage away, and somebody came through and threw acid on her. And these things are horrifying. So as artists, we look around and see what can we do. And so we're doing this online show in order to raise money for Asian Americans advancing justice. The entire show is, again, it's free. It's all just, we're taking donations for Asian Americans advancing justice. And it's a circus show. So we're going to have circus performers we've got a couple of people who are not even in Chicago. So it's a little bit national, with fire spinning, hand balancing, contortion, aerial silks. Somebody actually has a whole aerial silk rig in their apartment. And so they're going to film that. It's going to be amazing. And these are really fantastic performers too, literally people who have performed around the world. One of the guys who's performing with us was in the national tour of Pippin the musical. So we've got really, really excellent performers, and I'm excited about that show.
That's dope.
The live stream shows have been a little weird as a performer because you don't get the audience feedback, but they've also been really lovely, and it's nice seeing people in the chat enjoy things. It's about as close as we can get right now as to getting people together in one space.
That's awesome. Fred?
Oh no, sorry, I unmuted for some reason.
That's all right. We're winging it. Oh, do you have any mutual aid support or whatever projects that you wanted to shout out quickly?
I don't have anything in particular I want to shout out for artists. There's lots and lots of resources online. It's pretty easy to find compilation lists of lots of resources. So I would just direct anybody to look at those. The only sort of problem I know with some of those things are that a lot of people have been needing help. And so they've very quickly been overwhelmed. But resources are out there for, whatever level we've got right now. And at this point, beyond that, it's really just advocating with governments because we need help on a much larger scale than any individual group can provide.
Thanks, Dawn.
Thank you.
All right. So we're gonna wrap up the night with Steph Fowler. I'm gonna ruin this because should I say the acronyms or spell them out? I don't know what they are. I'll just say Steph Fowler.
You can just skip it. You can skip it. It doesn't matter.
Okay, I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
Okay, Steph Fowler has been working in the mental health and addiction field for the past 10 years and started a private practice in Lincoln Square 3 years ago. Using creativity, curiosity, humor, and a blend of postmodern therapy approaches, Steph's work focuses on helping people reclaim their lives from problems including anxiety, substance use, and disillusionment. She also has a special interest in working with people who identify as Black sheep, artists, and those in various helping professions. When she's not working or social distancing, Steph has been known to enjoy the therapeutic benefits of kickboxing, karaoke, cosplay, storytelling, and cat cafes, all things I love. Thanks for joining us, Steph.
Again,
thank
thanks
you
so much for
Steph.
having me.
One thing that we'll like to start off with is that Keidra and I have talked a bit about the idea of we're all in this together, those platitudes, and how due to various experiences, inequities, and stratification, that's just not possible. And there are a lot of suggestions out there about how to cope. And are there any sentiments, narratives that you think aren't helping at this moment? I'm also thinking about art in the world and pictures in windows.
Can you say a little bit more about the last, you're thinking about what?
Oh, just like the way that these ideas sort of manifest in the world, and you see them around, and just in terms of like what's helping, what's not helping, and how we experience them, and really maybe what they're disguising too. I'm being very sort of vague here.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really important thing to ask and a thing to look at that I'm not sure a lot of people take the time to actually dissect. And that's part of what I love doing in my work is there are so many narratives that are so insidious and just get kind of dropped into cultural, social media, all of these things that it's worth pausing to really think about. And so yeah, there's so many narratives that are not helpful right now. And I think there's an implied one that there is a right and wrong way to handle this. There is no right and wrong. There is no precedent set. There are not systems in place. We are all winging this. So even the fact that I'm here trying to answer this is me on the fly because I've never been through this. No, there are no experts in the mental health of pandemics because we haven't needed to have that. So this idea of right and wrong is really bullshit. And that I think anytime there is a sense of a should, like if you're starting to feel a should or sense a should or feel pressure of I should be doing something different, according to who? And pausing and actually considering like, where is that coming from? Is that coming from my boss? Is that coming from the CDC? Is that coming from the White House? Is that coming from social media, Instagram stuff? That I think that's a way to start interacting and being curious about those narratives and trying to spot them. But yeah, this idea of we're all in this together is one of the many well-intentioned platitudes that exist out there. We're not in it together in that we're not all having the same experience. And I think that there gets to be this idea that everybody's having the same experience because we're all experiencing it. And that is so far from the truth. It's so different. It's, there's people laid off who don't know where they're going to be getting money from. There's frontline workers who are worried about catching COVID and bringing it home to their families. There's people working from home who haven't had a lot of change and they actually are pretty well accustomed to this. There's people who, are undocumented and not getting stimulus check. There's people who've been missing out on weddings and graduations and some people who, do have some experience with isolation already because of depression or something who are actually kind of doing all right. Because they've been through this. This isn't their first rodeo. Kind of like Whitney was talking about before, that there's a lot of people with mental health backgrounds who are actually a little better equipped than some people who have not really been through this before. So I think making room for and understanding there are these dualities, there are these multiple ways of experiencing and going through this. I've seen this also in this narrative of you're not stuck at home, you're safe at home. That's not everybody's story, man. Like there's a lot of people who are in real bad situations and being at home is not safe. And to be so dismissive and not wanting to look at and acknowledge that some people are having a very, very hard time at home. Similarly, there's a very prominent person in the psychology world who I'm not going to name because I don't want to get added later by anybody, who wrote this really tone deaf thing and put it on their Instagram that said, we're all going to be okay. I'm like, are we though? What is that based on? That is not based on reality right now. And it's just so not only dismissive, but it makes people then second guess their own reactions to things of like, well, then I must be overreacting to this. No, you're not. You're probably having a very natural reaction to a pandemic of being concerned about your health and the health of others. But I think that goes to point out the toxic positivity and cult of happiness that we are so fond of here in our culture and society, that we want to bypass discomfort and get to where things feel better. And that's, again, like a sort of natural reaction. We don't want to stay there, but it's also to the detriment of understanding and empathizing with people. And I think that's also gets played out in sort of a implied business as usual that I'm hearing from a lot of corporations or businesses that are just not taking the time to either check in with their employees or understand that they might not be functioning super great right now, which is, again, to be expected with dealing with so much. But I've actually heard of some places sending out emails saying, we expect your billable hours and productivity to stay exactly the same, or actually expecting people to work more hours for the same pay, and not making any accommodations at all for what's actually happening. So that's pretty inhumane, if you ask me, but I'm not really shocked because we live in a society where, you know, capitalism rules and everything is focused on either getting out of this discomfort or getting back on your own 2 feet. And that's just an unfortunate reality of what a lot of people have to deal with, which I think is also leading to a little bit of this implied narrative about discipline of like the way to get through this is to learn a new skill or bake bread or learn the language or write the novel or whatever it is, which, listen, if you've got free time and that helps you not be in this echo chamber of your own head, rad, that's great, do that. But if you can't get there, that's not bad, that is human. And so what really the name of the game is trying to find what you can access and whatever feels okay right now.
Yeah, feel that. Kind of on a related note, well, and we talked about a little earlier when we kicked this off about just struggling and just struggle. Like, I mean, straight up, it was hard for me to get through this entire day. This entire day, I was just like, I'm going back to sleep. It was hard. And why is it so hard for us to do kind of the usual typical things right now? Like, why is our energy lagging, and why is in general that narrative of us all just being tired so common with us right now on a biological level?
Yeah, it is very much a biological physiological response right now. Our brains and bodies are going through a lot, and we are, like, a pandemic is a collective trauma. And so much has changed and continues to change, and we are constantly reacting to that and trying to make sense of and gather where our bearings are. And things like the recommendations continue to change, the stay at home continues to change, that we are kind of at the mercy of this stuff that we're out of control. We have no control over. We can only respond. And that's a tough place to be. That's a very powerless place to be. And so I think that there's a lot of people walking around right now or stuck at home right now in this fight or flight kind of place where our amygdala is like being fired and trying to respond to a threat. And that means that we're kind of in this fight or flight mode, but what are we doing? We're not fighting, we're not fleeing. So our bodies kind of are staying in this place of recycling all of the adrenaline and the cortisol, and it doesn't get a break, because even just going for a walk, which used to be enjoyable and relaxing, now it's like, who's wearing a mask? How close are they? If I go to the store, is everybody doing everything they need to be doing? That even the stuff that used to be a nice, enjoyable activity feels stressful now. And so we're either kind of in this heightened place where a lot of people are at, I think there's something about this week, like this week has hit some people like a ton of bricks. It feels like people have been able to kind of get by, and then this week is just crashing. And I think that that's what happens over time is we come down and then we can't focus. Like that part of our brain is offline. We can't really access it. It's really normal to have that brain fog and difficulty concentrating because our brain is really just doing what it evolutionarily wants to do, is protect us, but it doesn't know that we're at home. It doesn't know that we can actually kind of relax a little bit. And I think there's also just sort of this idea that we have a hard time with discomfort in this society. We have a hard time sitting with that. And so it's really hard to take on so much discomfort at once. Like it's really just too much, and it's getting overloading and getting overwhelming, and there's only so much anybody can do about that.
I just want to say quick, we have about 10 minutes left and we have a hard stop. And this is a lot for that little bit of time, but we're really curious if you have any tips or coping strategies on how we deal with this changed reality, but then also how do we deal with life once the shelter at home restrictions are lifted?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question for anybody that I'm not sure that I can totally answer in terms of what to expect, because there's so much uncertain, and we're going to have to kind of roll with that uncertainty and make the best decisions we can at the time. So because the information keeps changing, I think how we answer that now is going to look really different whenever the stay at home is actually lifted. But a lot of this is really a personal choice, and I can't emphasize that enough. Like nothing that I say should be gospel, because everybody's in a different situation with their health, with their family, with their financial needs. It really sucks that people are in this position to have to deal with competing needs of, do I make money or do I protect my health? And so part of the coping, I think, is just knowing you're doing the best you can. This is an impossible situation, and there is, again, not a right or wrong way. So listening to yourself, listening to your needs, doing the best you can to weigh your options. I think that something that can help is really spending time trying to counter that fight or flight response. And I hate to say that binging Netflix isn't going to do it. Actually slowing down, slowing your breathing, or getting that energy out, like actually trying to do the fight of a physical activity, to kind of cue to your brain that it's done, that it can slow down now, and do what you can to find the things that you do have a choice in, and reminding yourself, even if it's super small, that you have a choice in what you are wearing that day. And if you choose to stay in bed all day, let that be okay if that's your choice. I think taking breaks from news and social media, if you haven't already, we need to make space for some things that feel good, and not feeling guilty about doing that either, not feeling guilty about laughing, about using some humor, about finding those little pockets of joy or pockets of even neutral right now, is a way to kind of get by, and allowing that, again, without this sense of, well, other people have it worse, so I shouldn't be able to have this joy, this moment of feeling okay. That's not helpful. We need to find those moments to get through this.
Thanks so much, Steph. We have a couple more minutes. Do you have any support, mutual aid, anything that you wanted to lift up?
Honestly, your list. I'm pointing everybody to your list. It's I have it on my website right now, at inkwellpsychotherapy.com. Please forgive the rest of the page. It's under construction, but that's been really helpful. The only other things that come to mind are, I don't typically get on the soapbox about meditation, but I do think that's one of those things right now to help bring people's nervous systems kind of back into regulation. And Insight Timer is a free one, and their Yoga Nidra for sleep meditation is the only thing keeping me close to sane right now. So free Insight Timer is a good one. Open Path Collective is an online directory of therapists who will do sliding fee therapy sessions as well, because this is a lot. And also probably worth noting, if people have insurance, that right now, because of the governor's mandate, there is no cost sharing. So that means that insurance companies can't charge copays for most of their plans. So a lot of people are getting access to free therapy if you already have insurance. So if you've thought about it, now might be a time to kind of pursue that.
Amazing. Thank you. Oh, well, with that, we have 5 more minutes. We made it in on time. Hells yeah. Real quick, I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you, Whitney. Thank you, Don. Thank you, Steph. Thank you, Fred. Thank you, Hideout. Thank you, Homeroom. Thank you, whoever is watching. I really appreciate it. This has just been a little oasis of healing something, just real talk. Thank you for making the time, all of you. This has been really great. I truly appreciate it. Fred, want to say anything?
I just want to say thank you, Keidra, for your vision and this wonderful show, and everybody. I feel, I actually feel so much better listening and thinking, and look forward to listening to myself a little bit louder. I'm really appreciative for toxic positivity. I really like that term.
The term, yeah, the actual thing.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, not thankful for the toxicity, but for being able to sort of like identify this, like, oh, this is how I feel about it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, thank you all. This is great. That's pretty much it.
Thanks
Thank
so
you for
much
having me.
organizing.
Hopefully there'll be another one of these soon. Stay tuned for it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Whitney,
Thank
by the
you.
way, too, one last thing I wanted to say is I appreciated watching the video of you yelling into the night, which you described earlier, is that I have been howling with my family, and we've been doing this for years, but
He's
I
got
think
video of it.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I've been doing it more. Anyone who's listening, I encourage you to howl or shout. And by the way, we made it through the show without cursing. I'm not really sure how.
I am shocked. I am shocked because we both curse a lot.
Well,
I'm
I know.
really, really shocked.
Amazing. But I feel like we're howling so much louder now.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone's home to hear us, but I've been feeling really good.
And I want to say it's almost 8 o'clock, and in some neighborhoods, people are going to start screaming. And so if you live one of those neighborhoods, if you've noticed a lot of people yelling outside, please join them.
I might do that. It's not a bad idea. Oh, we're getting off now. Thanks, Hideout. They're like, you're out. Scream offline. Bye.